The portal doesn't open gently. It tears, like something on the other side decided the fabric between worlds was an inconvenience, and Ryu drops through it onto blood-soaked dirt with nothing but his gi and his discipline. Raiden stands over him, eyes white, crackling with the kind of energy that makes the air smell like a lightning strike. He's not asking, he's recruiting. Earthrealm needs a champion. And the God of Thunder just pulled the most dangerous human alive out of a sparring session. You know Ryu, the man who can dodge point-blank gunfire, shatter granite with a focused palm strike, and fire a bolt of compressed ki energy that hits with enough force to crater reinforced concrete. He's not superhuman in the comic book sense. He's the absolute ceiling of what disciplined human biology can physically produce. And he spent his entire life trying to find something that can break him. Outworld is about to answer that question in the worst possible way. Tier 1, the Tarkatan ambush versus Baraka. Baraka doesn't wait for an introduction. The second Ryu's feet find the arena floor, 3 feet of dense bone blade erupts from each forearm, and he's already moving. No posturing, no speech, just the wet sounds of blades cutting through air at roughly 40 miles per hour toward Ryu's torso. Here's the biomechanics problem Ryu faces immediately. A Tarkatan blade isn't a manufactured weapon with a machined edge. It's evolved bone, tapered to a tip that concentrates force into an area smaller than a sewing needle. When you run the math on the kinetic energy of a 220-pound mutant driving that strike forward, you're looking at roughly 3,200 psi of pressure at the point of contact. For context, a hydraulic press used to crush car engines operates at around 2,500 psi. Ryu's muscle density, trained beyond any documented human baseline, maxes out at a compressive strength somewhere around 1,800 psi. If he tries to block those blades with his forearms the way he'd block a kick, it doesn't break his arm comes off. So, Ryu doesn't block, he redirects. His micro parry system, which canonically operates fast enough to deflect bullets, works on a completely different mechanical principle. Instead of opposing the force, he strikes the flat side of the blade at the moment of extension, applying a lateral impulse of just a few newtons at precisely the right vector. The blade deflects by 4 or 5 degrees, which sounds tiny until you realize at full extension, that's the difference between a kill shot and a near miss by 12 inches. Baraka lunges 6 times in 3 seconds. Ryu misses none of them. The counter comes on the 7th step. Ryu drops his center of gravity, drives his lead foot into the dirt, and fires a Shoryuken directly up through Baraka's chin. The physics here are brutal and clean. A rising uppercut from a fighter of Ryu strength, loaded through the legs and core and released through a rotating fist, generates an upward force in excess of 4,000 newtons. Baraka's cervical vertebrae, specifically C2 through C4, take the full load of that transfer in a fraction of a second. That's not a knockout. That's a structural failure of the spine. Survival tier? S. Ryu's skeletal structure is completely intact. He didn't take a single clean hit, and his energy reserves are barely touched. By his standards, that was a warm-up. Then the temperature drops 80 degrees in 6 seconds, and the warm-up is over. Tier 2, the cryomancer's chill versus Sub-Zero. Frost crawls across the arena floor in a spreading pattern that moves too fast to be weather. Sub-Zero walks through like he owns the air. And the first ice projectile is already in the air before Ryu fully registers the temperature change. This is the fight where the environment itself becomes a weapon, and the science stops being about biomechanics and starts being about thermodynamics. Sub-Zero's cryomantic ability doesn't just produce cold. It extracts thermal energy from matter at a rate that has no natural equivalent. When that ice blast clips Ryu's left arm, the surface tissue drops to near freezing in under 2 seconds. At that temperature, the water inside individual cells start to crystallize, and the ice crystals have sharp edges. They rupture the cell membrane from the inside. If Sub-Zero lands a full body freeze on Ryu, every soft organ he has turns into a bag of broken glass. That's not an injury you can recover from. The cold slows Ryu's CNS transmission speed by a measurable margin. Nerve conduction velocity in a healthy human runs about 70 meters per second. Drop core tissue temperature by 15 degrees Celsius, and that falls closer to 40. His reaction window now has a lag. Sub-Zero reads it instantly and pushes harder. Ryu's answer is key. And this is where the physiology does something genuinely impossible. Ki maps closest to mitochondrial overdrive, a forced acceleration of cellular respiration so extreme that his body starts burning through caloric reserves to generate raw thermal output, pushing core temperature back up by sheer biological will. It costs enormously, but it keeps his cells intact. He loads every joule of that generated heat into a Shinku Hadoken and fires it directly into Sub-Zero's ice armor. The sudden thermal swing from near zero to several hundred degrees in the same material causes catastrophic thermal shock. Sub-Zero's armor explodes outward, and he goes down. Survival tier A. He won, but his caloric reserves are gutted and his core temperature is swinging in a dangerous direction. He's thawing out when the red laser sight paints a dot on his chest. Tier 3. The Cyber Initiative versus Sektor. The laser dot on his chest isn't a warning. It's a targeting solution. Sektor drops from above at terminal velocity and fires 2 homing missiles before his feet fully settle. The physics of this situation are ugly in a very specific way. A shoulder-fired missile detonates with a primary fragmentation radius of roughly 15 feet. But the thing that kills people inside that radius isn't always the shrapnel. It's the overpressure wave. The explosion compresses the surrounding air so fast and so hard that the pressure differential between the outside of your body and the inside of your body becomes catastrophic. Eardrums rupture at 5 psi overpressure. Lungs collapse at around 15. At close range, a detonating warhead generates peaks above 100 psi for a fraction of a second, enough to liquefy soft tissue without leaving a visible mark. Ryu can't trade punches with a shockwave, so he doesn't try. He goes into the Tatsumaki Senpuku-yaku, spinning at high angular velocity with limbs extended. And this is where fluid dynamics saves his life. The rapid rotation creates a localized low-pressure zone around his body, a pressure vacuum that partially equalizes the incoming blast differential. The shrapnel gets deflected outward along his rotational field rather than punching straight through him. He comes out of the spin with both ears bleeding and his forearms screaming, but his lungs are still working. Sektor switches to close combat because his missile rack is spent. And that's the mistake. In close quarters, Ryu isn't a man fighting a machine. He's a precision instrument attacking a system. Cyborg hydraulics run on pressurized fluid lines routed through the joints, and those lines are the weakest structural point in the design. Ryu stops throwing at the armor plating entirely. Every strike goes to a knee joint, a shoulder coupling, an elbow hinge, with exactly enough force to rupture the internal line without wasting energy on the surrounding steel. Sektor's movement starts locking up joint by joint, targeting systems losing calibration as the hydraulic pressure drops. When Ryu finally drives a palm strike into the center of the chest plate, there's almost no resistance left. The chest caves. Sektor's power core goes dark. Survival tier B. He won, but the concussive load from those detonations left microfractures running through both forearm bones and a concussion bad enough that his visual field is moving slightly out of sync with reality. He's fighting with broken instruments now. Tier 4. The Hellfire Grudge versus Scorpion. The spear doesn't announce itself. It punches through Ryu's left shoulder from behind. Barbed tip locking into the muscle. And before he can process the damage, Scorpion has already yanked the rope taut and pulled. The portal that opens isn't a spatial shortcut. It's a drop into the nether realm. And the nether realm has its own atmospheric biology that starts working on Ryu the moment he lands. Hellfire isn't combustion. Normal fire damages tissue through thermal transfer, cooking proteins and triggering localized pain receptors. Hellfire operates on the nervous system directly, and the distinction matters enormously. It bypasses the skin entirely and stimulates nociceptors at the neurological level, flooding the pain-processing centers of the brain with signals that have no physical source. There's no burn to stop, no wound to pressure. Ryu's brain just interprets every nerve ending in his body as being on fire simultaneously. And there's no key discipline sophisticated enough to filter a signal coming from inside the CNS itself. His concentration fractures. Every technique he tries to build collapses before he can focus it. Scorpion doesn't need to be clever. He walks through the concussed, bleeding, neurologically overwhelmed martial artist and puts him in the ground methodically. 2 cracked ribs on the left side. A third gives way completely, and the fractured edge presses toward his lung. His already compromised reaction time drops further as blood pressure falls from the shoulder wound. Ryu's baseline human durability, extraordinary by any earthly standard, hits its ceiling, and the ceiling is too low for this room. He has one option left, and it's a door he's spent his entire life refusing to open. The Satsui no Hado, in biological terms, is a complete executive override of the body's self-preservation circuitry. His brain cuts all pain signal processing, floods the bloodstream with adrenaline and cortisol at concentrations that would be clinically fatal over any extended period, and removes every neurological limiter that normally prevents muscles from generating forces high enough to tear themselves apart. Those limiters exist for a reason. Ryu tears them out anyway. His eyes go dark. His gi splits at the shoulders from the sudden expansion of muscle fiber beyond its normal operational range. And he hits Scorpion with the kind of force that doesn't belong in a conversation about human physiology. Scorpion comes apart, not metaphorically. The Spectre's physical form, already tenuous between the living world and whatever he is, can't hold structure against that output. Evil Ryu stands over the dissipating smoke of him, breathing in ragged pulls. Muscles actively tearing themselves in the aftermath of forces they were never designed to produce. Survival tier B. He's upright. That's the best thing you can say about it. The Satsui no Hado burns out, and every suppressed pain signal hits him at once, dropping him to one knee in a wave of damage his body suddenly can't ignore anymore. Tier 5. The Soul Harvest versus Shang Tsung. The Satsui no Hado doesn't fade cleanly. It drains out of him like water through a cracked hull. And what's left when it's gone is every bill coming due at once. Lactic acid that his nervous system couldn't register while the override was running now floods his muscle tissue in full concentration. His forearms, already fractured, lock up. His shoulder wound from Scorpion's spear stopped clotting properly somewhere in the nether realm. He gets back to one foot, then the other. Stands in the dirt of the Outworld, looking like a man who already lost. Shang Tsung doesn't rush. He doesn't open with a fireball or a morph. He just looks at Ryu the way a man looks at a meal, and that's when the pull starts. The science of what Shang Tsung does maps onto bioelectricity in a way that's genuinely disturbing. Every function in the human body runs on electrical signaling. Your heart contracts because an electrical pulse from the sinoatrial node tells it to. Your diaphragm pulls air because your phrenic nerve fires on a voltage differential. Your brain processes anything at all because neurons are constantly exchanging charged ions across a membrane. That electrical system isn't metaphorical. It's measurable, it's physical, and it runs on a continuous energy supply sourced from ATP production at the cellular level. Ryu's ATP pipeline is already nearly empty. The key overdrive against Sub-Zero burned his caloric reserves down to critical levels. The Satsui no Hado consumed whatever margin was left. His cells aren't generating enough adenosine triphosphate to sustain output at any meaningful level, which means the electrical system of his body is running on borrowed current. Shang Tsung reaches in and takes it. Ryu feels his hands first. He tries to form a Hadoken, the most fundamental technique he has. The one he's thrown 10,000 times against opponents twice his size. His palms are up, his fingers curl. Nothing happens, not a flicker. The key that always answered him, even at his worst, even broken and bleeding in a losing fight, isn't there. The circuit is open. There's no charge left to complete it. His heart skips, then it skips again. The sinoatrial node loses its signal. His legs stop taking instructions. He goes down sideways, and the last thing his brain processes before the current drops to zero is the sound of Shang Tsung exhaling like a man finishing a satisfying meal. Survival tier? F. Ryu didn't quit and didn't break. Outworld just collected what it was owed. His body hit every wall human biology has and punched through most of them. Outworld has walls made of something else entirely. Drop your fighter's name in the comments and we'll run them through the same gauntlet. Subscribe so you don't miss it.